Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay. On Tuesday night, a miracle that many Sanders supporters were hoping for didn't happen. Hillary Clinton won by almost 13%, at least so far, as there's apparently still a bunch of votes to be counted. But it's certainly a fairly decisive win for Clinton. The Sanders forces were hoping at least for it to be a tie and perhaps be another Michigan and pull off a victory. But right across the country, a lot of people are talking about what's next. Certainly Sanders supporters and political people involved in third parties and otherwise, a big discussion of what's going to be the next act. So now joining us from California, from Los Angeles, is Bob Scheer. Bob's the editor-in-chief of Truthdig. He's the host of the podcast Scheer Intelligence. He's covered wars, politics, international affairs, and social issues for decades. He worked for the LA Times for over 30 years and ran for Congress in California in 1966. Thanks for joining us, Bob.
Good to be here. You know, you're being a little bit pessimistic, though. I think Bernie Sanders' vote in California was quite miraculous. And I think as his whole campaign has been, I thought this guy was going to get 3-4% of the vote, and they blow him away just the way, you know, even the other candidates, Lincoln Chafee and the former mayor of your hometown there in Baltimore and governor, you know, where'd those guys get 2-3%? Here's Bernie Sanders with a far more principled message, a real challenge to the establishment. And it seems that on election day in California, he actually tied Hillary. It was the absentee ballots, you know, all the previous campaigning that the Democratic Party machine, which is the strongest Democratic machine in the nation now. The Democrats have solid control of California. They give out a lot of jobs. They control a lot of decision-making. And Bernie Sanders was challenging that machine. And the idea that he says, last count I looked at, he ends up with almost 44% of vote, which, by the way, is I had 45 when I ran against an incumbent pro-war Democrat back in Oakland and Berkeley in '66. But I'll tell you, it's an amazing vote. This is a difficult state to come from nowhere, which is really what Bernie did. People didn't know his name. They didn't know Vermont. You know, this is a huge population spread out. And for Bernie Sanders to get the attention of this many people, and again, this is not Montana where winning Democrats is not winning the state. This is a deep blue state. And I think it shows that Hillary is in trouble because she's extremely well known. She's the most well-known Democrat around, and people know her history. They know the record she's running on. And clearly, a very large number of Democrats in a very liberal Democratic, powerful Democratic state are rejecting her on the basis of her record. They think she's too hawkish. They think she's too opportunistic. And most of all, they think she's in bed with Wall Street. And Wall Street, going back to the Enron crisis, has savaged this state. The housing meltdown hit California harder than any other state. And all those Wall Street machinations really hurt people here. They hurt the Latino community very much. They hurt the African-American community, and they hurt the working community very much. You go to a place like Riverside, it's still devastated by that. Right. And so I think the vote for Bernie was incredibly positive.
Now, the media is playing this. We're doing this the day after the vote, and tomorrow Bernie Sanders is going to meet with President Obama. And the way the media is playing this, and a lot of the punditry, is that President Obama and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, they're all kind of have the same objective. These sort of shared values is the term you keep hearing, or shared liberal values. But in fact, both President Obama and Hillary Clinton represent a very specific section of the Democratic Party. They're very closely aligned with the various billionaires that help fund the Democratic Party. They're, as we know, President Obama's finance team was essentially a Wall Street team and so on. And Hillary's clearly has the same kind of relationships. Sanders' proposals have been, on the face of it, very much more a challenge to Wall Street, a challenge to the billionaire class, as he calls it, and single-payer health care and things like that are real challenges to those who have such concentrated power. It's not just a difference of opinion or policy about how to get to the same objectives. They represent different interests. Now, the interests may converge on the question of stopping Trump, But on many other issues, the differences are profound. How does Sanders navigate this?
It's not up to Sanders to navigate because most of the people who have been motivated to vote for Sanders know what you just said is exactly true. I mean, they're not rejecting Hillary because she's a woman, and they're not rejecting Hillary because she's a Democrat. They're rejecting Hillary because of that she represents the right of center capture of the Democratic Party, what Clinton's triangulation represented, only she's a bit worse. She's more hawkish than her husband. She's much more hawkish than Obama. If you read her her biographical account of her days in the State Department, she's the hawk in the administration. She wants to go knock off the Gaddafi in Libya, and Obama doesn't want it. She wants to wage even more intense war in Syria than Obama does. She's friendlier with Wall Street by far than Obama has been. So I think you give Obama a bit of a bad rap here if you put him right there with Hillary. Hillary's Margaret Thatcher in this roundup, and one should be aware of it. There's nothing progressive or benign about Hillary Clinton's message. It's quite clear that she supports the Goldman Sachs view of the economy, and she very much supports a neoconservative view of the world. There's a reason why a lot of these neoconservatives on the Republican side are thinking about supporting Hillary, because actually Trump is a mixed bag on foreign policy. He has a bit of the isolationist in him. He's, claims he didn't support the Iraq War. He has some cautions about foreign intervention. So Hillary really represents a very conservative, warmongering position on foreign policy, and a really fawning attitude towards Wall Street. That's not kidding around. It's real. And I think Bernie Sanders alluded to that in his Meet the Press interview. I thought it was quite revealing, where he criticized the New York Times, he criticized the establishment, and he made it clear he doesn't deliver his voters. It reminded me of my own run for Congress back in '66. People said, "Are you going to now back the incumbent?" And I said, "Look, I don't deliver these voters. They went for me because they rejected the incumbent. They rejected the establishment." And that turned out to be true. They rejected the incumbent, and they elected Ron Dellums to be the congressman. And now Barbara Lee, who's probably the most interesting member of the House, represents that same district. And I think there's a lesson in it. Progressive political leaders cannot deliver their followers. The followers go with them because they think they have integrity. If Bernie Sanders sells out and slavishly endorses the Democratic Party and gets no serious shift in their positions, he'll lose his followers. And they'll go for someone like Jill Stein. And Jill Stein is a worthy person to go to. The Green Party has an enviable record of being progressive on everything from global warming to, not wasting money and lives on needless wars, to caring about working people. Jill Stein is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Medical School. She knows the healthcare issue inside out. She's been involved in grassroots politics. And so, a lot of folks I know who are very enthusiastic for Bernie, if Bernie can't get some major shift in the Democratic Party, they'll go for Jill Stein. Why not?
And one could do that certainly in states like California, particularly, and Maryland for that matter. There's a lot of states where the Republican Party really isn't going to do much, and especially with Trump as the candidate, it's actually a perfect opportunity for a party like the Greens.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, certainly about California. Trump is not going to carry California. He's not going to carry Silicon Valley. He's not going to carry the corporate sector because he's a loose cannon. And, one place where California has become way ahead of the rest of the country is on the question of respect for what immigrants bring to this country, particularly from the south of the border. Central America, Mexico, and so forth. We had this huge fight over Prop 187. The Republicans stupidly thought they could ride anti-immigrant, even though the guy riding it, former Governor Pete Wilson, was not particularly anti-immigrant, but he did it for opportunistic reasons, and they got smashed in the state now We're way past that. And so it won't be a contest in California. And yes, a large number of people will show their protest by going for a third party. On the conservative side, they might go for the libertarian candidate because, after all, libertarians, when they're principled, are against crony capitalism. They're against the surveillance state. They're not for jailing people over minor offenses. They're not for filling the prisons. So there's a lot of reason to go on both sides for an independent. But let me say something, even the swing states, like what happened with Nader and Florida, it's not true that Nader caused Gore Florida. But I could see if Hillary Clinton moves, and I think she will move to the right, and she embraces a hard line on issues like intervention, and she backs off her little bit of embrace of Sanders on a wage increase, on controlling Wall Street and so forth, I could see people in swing states saying, no, we've had more of that. Let me ask you a question. How did Trump get to be so important? Now, some people think it's just because he's a great demagogue, or he had showbiz experience or something. But that's garbage. Demagogues don't succeed because they're effective demagogues. They succeed because there's an unhappy population. And there are different narratives being presented as to why they're unhappy. And what Trump has done is said he was able to say, the Republican establishment, everyone on this stage with me, has failed you. They have been in power and you are hurting. This system is not working for you. Your jobs are not paying enough. You've been screwed by lousy trade agreements, okay? You've been screwed by wasteful wars. He said a lot of this stuff that makes perfect sense. And then he comes across and he does a right-wing neo-fascist demagogic attack on immigrants. Well, that's terrible. It is dangerous. But the fact is, Trump is important because people are unhappy on the conservative side. Sanders was important and is important precisely because many people who reject the jingoism of the Republicans are unhappy also. And, why are so many young people for Sanders? I was amazed in this election. I teach a rather large class at the University of Southern California, and my class educated me about Sanders. I always liked Sanders, but I didn't think he'd do very well. And then I saw all these laptops open up, right. Bernie Sanders stickers on them. I learned from my students that this guy was believable. It wasn't of prior knowledge.
Paul Ryan, I would think, more or less representing much of the Republican leadership, calls Donald Trump a racist, at least his remarks racist. He says textbook racism. It seems to me that much of the leadership of the Republican Party is in the process of bailing on Trump, ceding the presidency to Clinton, in order to make a real fight for the control of Congress. And for people talking about what's next in terms of the people involved in the Sanders movement, how much do you think they are or will or should be paying attention to these what they call down ticket races, especially in the House and the Senate?
Well, it depends on who's on the ticket. We're lucky in California, and the two people vying for the Senate, because we got this crazy system now where the top vote getters in the primary from any primary, from any party, get to vote. So we have Sanchez and Harris, and they're both progressive Democrats. And so we will have a progressive senator replacing Barbara Boxer, who was also a progressive senator. And so, that happens also. But I think the real issue will be, how do you stop this jingoistic movement? How do you stop what Trump represents? And I think if you rally around Hillary Clinton and she doesn't outline a more progressive position, and I don't expect her to.
And even if she outlines it for the sake of the campaign, there's no reason to think that's what she's going to do once she's in power.
Well, at least if she would take some risks in the campaign by, taking some progressive, or making some serious commitment, for instance, bringing back Glass-Steagall and, breaking up the banks. I mean, it's outrageous that some liberal, self-identified liberals like Paul Krugman in the New York Times would dare say that Bernie Sanders didn't make sense on the economy. How are you going to break up the banks? Well, you just undo what Bill Clinton did in allowing those banks to merge and take people's savings and commercial banks and merge them with the industrial banks. He knows darn well what you can do. Now, Elizabeth Warren knows what you can do. If Hillary Clinton picks somebody like Elizabeth Warren, if she embraces what Elizabeth Warren has said.
I don't like making predictions, but in 14 million years, I cannot believe Hillary Clinton's
So
backers will let her pick Warren as the vice president.
So if Hillary Clinton goes for the Republican support, she will not be better. And then 4 years from now, what Trump represents will be stronger. Look, let's just take one little thing, not little thing, Medicare. I just came from the dentist today, and I went to the doctor yesterday, and I make a good living, but my co-pays really hit me. I had to leave $2,000 at the dental office today, okay, to get my teeth fixed, out of my pocket, not out of the supposed dental insurance I had. And the other day, I had to leave $800 out of my pocket to get a heart echo chamber test. That's the deductible. Okay. Now I can hit it. I can take that hit. I'm working all the time, even at my advanced age. But most people can't. And to pretend that somehow Obamacare, yes, it's better than what was before, but to pretend that we got a lot of happy campers out there is utter nonsense, utter nonsense. And if we don't dramatically improve that system and move in the direction of single payer or lower the age for Medicare and so forth, that issue's not going to go away. People have a right to complain. They're avoiding going to the doctors because they can't do the copay. And you take the trade agreements. If Hillary Clinton is going to give us more of these lousy trade agreements, and which do not include human rights, workers' rights, environmental concerns in these agreements, do not protect American workers. That's why she lost Michigan. Yeah, trade agreements that say we don't care that you can use child labor around the world, that you don't have to pay a decent minimum wage, you don't allow unions to organize, and these are issues that you can't bargain away. You're not going to improve the lot of American people, and they're hurting. One thing this election has shown is that the intelligentsia, the mass media, the big shots, most of them are tied in to a welfare program that the super rich have. They buy off the top professor class. They buy off the mass media. They have a lot of jobs. There's a lot of crumbs dropping off the table for the ones they want to reach. There are a lot of people, licking their lips now over the jobs they're going to get in a Clinton administration. But most people are not on that gravy train. And the fact is, we've had insensitivity on the part of the liberal governing class, the liberal elite, to the suffering of most Americans. And now we have a revolt. We've had a revolt in the Republican Party that has swept away their leadership, and Bernie Sanders has come very close. An improbable, older, white guy, originally from Brooklyn, from a small state, doing so incredibly well. Why? Because people on the Democratic side are disgusted with the leadership.
Right.
That's it. And that's a harsh reality. And you get 4 more years of Clinton, and you're going to have a much stronger right-wing force in America that will come to power.
I guess the other side, the question will be whether the Sanders movement mounts a challenge in 2020 that builds on the current Sanders movement.
Well, it shouldn't
perhaps make her a one-time president.
It shouldn't be up to Sanders. It should be up to the people
I'm talking about the movement.
And one way they can do it is if Bernie Sanders, much as I respect what he's done, doesn't provide leadership now by pressuring the leadership of the Democratic Party, then people should turn to a Jill Stein. They should turn to alternatives. This is no time to say, oh, Papa or Grandpa has said we're now going to rally around Margaret Thatcher. Let's all fall in line. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
Well, thanks very much for joining us, Bob.
It's a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network. And don't forget, we don't take corporate money, government money. We don't sell advertising. We're really dependent on viewer support. So somewhere around this player, there's a donate button. And if you don't click it, we can't do this.